You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. On the left-hand side of your screen, the ghost of what was a Category 5 Typhoon landfall that occurred not so very long ago, less than 36 hours, and now there's hardly anything left of Typhoon Goni in the South China Sea now. Also, Tropical Storm Atsani, though, now has more room to breathe and is blowing up in convection, suggestions that it could be a typhoon before making landfall in the Philippines. We've got double coverage tonight because the Atlantic is up again, and this time it's Tropical Storm Eta, which is just short of hurricane strength, with winds of 70 miles per hour, estimated pressure of 989 millibars. It has sparked hurricane warnings for the coast of Nicaragua. Other warnings in effect for this storm as well, which could be a significant rainmaker. That's what we're really worried about already, as far as we know, or what I saw earlier, a CDPS stage 7. So we'll talk about that, we'll talk about everything, and we'll sort of be directed by what our viewers want to hear about the most tonight, or today, wherever you are around the world. Currently 1 AM UTC, and we were supposed to start an hour earlier, but Strat has an explanation for that. Strat.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, by the way. Again, it's daylight savings time here today in America, and I had forgotten that UTC time and Zulu time do not change with the country's time when they have their own time zones change. So I was still acting as if it was yesterday, and 8 p.m. Eastern was midnight UTC. That is not the case, unfortunately. And here we are at 1 a.m. UTC instead.
Ridiculous. I was ready. I was waiting at 20 minutes to last hour to start the stream, and I look at the video page and Strat scheduled it for now. Well, here we are nonetheless. I don't think we'll lose much sleep to that. So where shall we begin? Well, let's talk about Eta right now, because that's sparking the warnings. Hurricane warning there for the coast of Nicaragua, pretty much covering the whole National Hurricane Center cone up to the border with Honduras. Part of Honduras there under hurricane watches, as well as a tropical storm warning, and further west a tropical storm watch. National Hurricane Center even are pretty sure that this is going to rapidly intensify from here on in up until landfall, and suggestions, well, they're suggesting that the wind speed will be just short of major hurricane status. We're losing our voices here after Goni last week. Major hurricane status possible. 110 miles per hour is their forecast. And it wouldn't surprise me at all to see it get to Category 3.
I mean, it's technically already rapidly intensified. We're going from I think a 30-mile-an-hour tropical depression yesterday to a 65-mile-an-hour tropical storm, or 35 miles an hour to 65 miles an hour. That's 30 miles an hour in a day. That classifies rapid intensification under their standards. So even though it hasn't become a hurricane, it's already going pretty quickly towards that strength.
Yes. Do we think Eta will re-emerge towards Cuba and possibly South Florida, as some models suggest? Well, they've been flip-flopping a little bit, as we like to say. One school of thought has a second disturbance that develops from the remnant energy of Tropical Storm Eta and then becomes its own tropical cyclone. Other model simulations are suggesting that this storm will carry on in its own right and then have some kind of tour around Cuba and then up to the Bahamas, then back to Cuba again. I don't even start on that one. That's a GFS scenario from 18Z, which has a major hurricane late on, but very crazy. But you know, in a year like this, not out of the realms of possibility. What we will focus on, though, is that the 5-day forecast shows this. Hurricane landfall most likely, almost certain for Central America, and then moving through tropical depression might make it to Belize.
And, I think in a situation like this, just looking at the, forecast track doesn't tell the full story with the storm. Because even if, say, it has, another life of some sort or piece of energy has a new burst of life in the Caribbean Sea, say, over a week from now, in the very near term, in the forecast period, we're looking at the potential for about a meter of rainfall in Central America near where this thing comes on shore and moving inland as well. So, I mean, even though it's not nearly as strong as Goni or Raleigh was yesterday, it still poses a major threat because of that. I saw actually a question in the comment section of one of our videos asking, why is this storm rated, only 2 things below on the CDPS scale Goni was? The answer is, rainfall causes 90% of the deaths, rainfall and flooding, which can include storm surge too, causes 90% of the deaths from tropical cyclones. And when you have a storm that's set to move very slowly and drop 3 feet of rain, or about a meter, that's a serious concern and can cause major damage.
Yeah, I saw that comment as well, and it's honestly astonishing. When I first heard the CDPS scale, I was like, what? And even I couldn't comprehend it for a moment there.
Indeed, and you, Christian, you're here with us tonight as well. You did the update on this storm earlier today.
I did, yep. Apparently there's a couple of errors in it, but I'm not going to gloss over those. Yeah, so... so I've been
He knows his
studying this storm.
mistakes, he knows what they are. So let's not go on about that.
Yeah, please, for my own sanity, please.
I'm just going to go on to this imagery, what we're showing here. I've not sorted this imagery out since we streamed on Goni. You can see Atsani there. Obviously we're covering both sides of the world. What's left of Goni on the left hand side, still probably a tropical storm, albeit very barely. Tiny bit of convection blowing up. Atsani taking over now, it would appear, on the eastern side of the Philippines, who don't appear to be getting a break. That will intensify. Let's see if we can go on to this imagery, which should show us Tropical Storm Eta right now on rapid scan. There it is. So it's after dark now, and this should be a loop that loads shortly, but it's got a decent structure right now.
Yeah, I mean, Eta, out of all 3 of the active tropical cyclones right now, is probably the most impressive structure. Goni's basically collapsed after moving over land. Thankfully, it weakened at an extremely rapid pace. We're talking down right now 150 miles per hour sustained winds. We're talking down over 250 kilometers per hour sustained winds in just over a day. And I just wanted to comment as well really quick about Atsani. I think the satellite imagery could be a bit misleading because there's a huge blob of convection west of Atsani Center that makes it look like it's actually closer to land in the Philippines than it really is. The center's, well off to the east of that still.
Well, yeah, it's going to do a loop yet, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And the track forecast is really uncertain too. So, I mean, the uncertainty ranges from Taiwan all the way to central Luzon right now for the next 5 days with this system. It's going to, move northwest, stall, and do a loop in a circle, and then, head for one of them or in between, either Luzon or Taiwan, or even split them and go in between.
Let's just go on to this. This won't be up to date. This is showing still Goni, which is still relevant, of course, but I just want to get it to show Atsani's track forecast as well. Got to type in a few things here, and there it is. So, well, there's the JMA forecast for it. They're really not sure exactly where it's going to go. Huge cone on day 4 and 5, and as you can see, the movement in the first 2 to 3 days is very uncertain. Indeed, within the next 2 days, it's not likely to track a distance greater than its current wind extent.
Yeah, and even now, those forecasts have seen some substantial deviation too. Yesterday, WC was shifting between it being well north of Luzon, then they moved it all the way down to be approaching landfall or coming on shore in northern Luzon. Then this morning, local time, or sorry, this evening local time last night, they shifted it back north again by a large margin. And just now, their newest advisory, they've shifted it back south again to show a Luzon landfall. So there's a lot of uncertainty with this system, but regardless, it could be a risk for either Taiwan or the Philippines. And despite what it does in full, if it splits them, you could still be seeing some extra rainfall from the system.
Toing and froing there. Let's take some questions, and we welcome questions here on this stream tonight on our YouTube channel. If you're watching us there, start your message with Force 13 all in text. It will light up for us. GFS and other models saying Goni can weaken into a tropical storm offshore is just right. Oh, talking about what the GFS was saying earlier. Well, yes, the massive capitulation down to 50 miles per hour roughly right now. If that, the models weren't far wrong. 12 hours later than they said, but a Category 5 really did weaken to a minimal tropical storm in a day and a half.
I think the thing
Not just the Category 5, 195 mile per hour.
I think the thing you can see, though, when you have storms that are real upper echelons of strength, and I think a good comparison, at least in this regard, for another example of such an occurrence would be Patricia in the Eastern Pacific, is that when they're so strong, more minor disruptions, or disruptions that would typically not be as catastrophic to the structure of a weaker system, can do a massive number on them. Patricia also weakened about this much in the same time frame, for example. So when you have land
start... It's a massive continent, Mexico.
Well, yeah, that's true, but the Philippines also have
they have high mountains.
Pass over.
Yes.
Typically, I guess, you'd say, oh, you have a strong storm that's just going to pass over a mountainous terrain mass and then emerge back out over another mass of water. You'd say it could knock it down 2 to 3 categories. That's what happens with the Philippines a lot. Or in the Atlantic, you'd say, oh, that's what Hispaniola does.
Yes.
But sometimes when a storm's really just that far up there, a smaller disruption just can completely capitulate it.
It completely unraveled. Is the HWRF's prediction for Eta more likely to be correct given the current rapid intensification? Last I saw the HWRF, it was saying that the storm would, I can't remember if it was to make a proper landfall, but eventually it would end up near Belize as a major hurricane or something like that.
I wouldn't put too much stock in a singular model with Eta just because the uncertainty and spread over whether or not this is just going to either move into Central America and fizzle, or go into the Pacific, or recurve back into the Caribbean is still really widespread and unclear.
I'd like to point out one thing right now. On National Hurricane Center intermediate advisories, they don't update the cone. They update the position only, and sometimes it can skew the first part of the cone. Well, I can tell you right now, it's gone south of their forecast because the cone's wobbled a bit to the north there. So, if it's already moving south of forecast, then that could well be a trend, and it's already on the same latitude as the Nicaragua-Honduras border. I can't see it lifting enough to avoid significant land interaction. I see that there's been people comparing it to Mitch. It's no.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. I don't think it's likely.
Not Mitch in terms of track, and probably not intensity. Better not be. But impacts. Well, Mitch of course was extremely bad, historic even. But let's not forget that 2005 had a storm just like this. Late in the season.
That was Gamma of that year,
Beta.
right? Or was that Beta?
It's Beta.
There's so many at this point, you forget which one.
Yeah. 2005
so
had that, and that was a Category 3 landfall. That was a pretty bad storm for the region, and this really reminds me of that, actually.
What I would say I'm concerned about in terms of the system wouldn't be, oh, does this go north of Nicaragua or Honduras, and then impact, say, Belize or the Yucatan Peninsula as a major hurricane. I would be focusing more on, the short term and some of the models that slow this thing down near or just inland. Some of them have it really kind of take a little bit of the dip to a south, stall for a little bit, and then push into Central America, which is, somewhat depicted on the forecast cone with that very slow motion moving inland for the first day or so. If that happens a little bit offshore, then you're going to have the stronger rain bands that are wrapping around this system not really begin to unravel for at least a little bit longer as the storm remains just offshore. So it's going to be interesting to see if that unfolds in terms of a rainfall threat.
Yep, just want to take everyone on a whistle-stop tour around the world right now, because there's a lot of, well, obviously the two main events on different sides of the world. So this is the Atlantic picture. Not much else going on there right now, which is good news, especially for this time of year. November the 2nd, it's time for the Atlantic to start dying, but I'm not sure whether it will listen. The Eastern Pacific looks like this. There should be an area that develops. I think you can see it there on the right hand side of the image. It might be that one. If not, it's just behind it. That's probably going to develop into a tropical cyclone. Shouldn't be that strong. Will remain out at sea. There is also a tiny chance that a Central Pacific subtropical low or non-tropical low turns subtropical north of Hawaii next week or this weekend. So look out for that one. The Western Pacific, someone asked about 91W, so this is why I've gone to the Western Pacific, so I can show you everything. So you have Goni, which is looking a skeleton of what it used to be. Atsani, which is blowing up decent amounts of convection, but the center is on the eastern side of that. Then you've got that swirl of convection there and some good rotation by the looks of it, although it's probably not at the low levels from what must be Invest 91W. I haven't checked personally, but it's the only thing that could be it. So that's making some progress. Models aren't keen on it developing straight away. Probably the end of the week or this weekend for its actual development, and by then it will be in the Philippine Sea. If it develops, we're not fully sure whether it will do that or not just yet. But if it does, you'll be looking again, possibly Luzon, possibly through the Channel into the South China Sea, and then onto maybe towards Hong Kong or the coast of China. Can Eta become a major hurricane?
Well, I mean, it is possible. I believe it's forecast to landfall as Category 2, but I could be wrong.
Yes, it is. High-end Category 2 on the forecast.
So it is possible it could intensify further to just grapple onto major status. Again, I'm not 100% sure, but
Okay, Strat, will the Atlantic hurricane season reach hyperactive status, I suppose you could call it, because the season is 8 points away. It's measured by accumulated cyclone energy.
If they're talking about the borderline between, active or above average and then hyperactive in terms of accumulated cyclone energy, which is
Yes.
used to calculate how active a season is in terms of strength for storms. If Eta gets strong enough fast enough in the next, 48 hours, because it is supposed to make landfall in a little over 36 hours, if not a little bit less than that, it could do it. But just because Eta has so little time, if it gets stronger, it won't have a lot of 6-hour points before collapses inland to the point where it won't generate any more points.
8 points away though, Strat, and I must tell everyone one easy method of counting it up, at least at one intensity point. 115 miles per hour is equivalent to 1 ace every 6 hours.
Yeah, so I mean,
that really is impressive.
But that just means that it's almost certain that Eta won't generate enough ace in time to get to that. Break
No,
the barrier.
yeah, I don't think Ada will push it over the edge, but
It'll probably happen
something
though this season.
else.
You know, if you use the longer range models, they are hinting that we could see some more development down the line within the next 2 weeks potentially. You know, don't pick out any one of those and say, oh, this specific system will form. But if Ada gets us close, it's more likely than not even a weaker system, if it persists for a couple days, would try to carry us over the final mark for that.
More questions. How come the Eastern and Central Pacific doesn't name subtropical systems? They haven't recognised a bunch of subtropical systems over the years. I hold out hope that they will one day do it properly. I don't hold out hope really though. But we'll see what happens this week. And what is the maximum number of additional storms we could see until the end of December? I assume they mean in the Atlantic. I looked at long-range, ultra-long-range models for this month, for November. Can't tell you about December, but for this month, November, there are probably going to be 6 tropical cyclone opportunities. Now, what I mean by that is that something that the models throw up that say, well, this could be, this is an area of interest that could develop, and usually you'd expect that maybe 40 or 50% get taken during just after peak season. During our peak season, August into September, 100% of opportunities were taken. Right now I think we're something at about 50-60%, and that starts to drop later on you go in the season. So I think we're on for 2 more tropical cyclones in November at least.
And if one of them forms and just persists for, say, more than a couple advisories on top of what Eta does, you probably get to that mark for hyperactive, I guess. Depends on how long it lasts and how much Eta does right now.
They're both trash storms.
That's true. I think more importantly, though, at least in terms of historical context, that would break the barrier for the most tropical storm strength storms in one season in the Atlantic Basin.
That's a matter of when, isn't it?
Unfortunately, yeah. Especially since I think we were talking about it a couple days ago. Indications that climatologically it could be unseasonably favorable in the main development region later this month.
There's a comment there, looking at some microwave imagery, I would guess because it's a little old, it was showing around 3/4 of an eye wall, and their guess is that it's closed by now. Recon are around, aren't they? What did they get earlier?
They were matching the microwave for the most part, showing an eye was trying to close up or form. That wasn't there yet. I mean, the thing is, Recon hasn't been in there since 3 hours ago, about now.
Oh,
and
right.
There isn't a new one there yet, although it looks like it's been taking off right now. So it's possible that you've seen a system consolidate further in the past 3 hours or so, but it wouldn't be too clear to say unless we have new definitive data to prove or disprove that.
We don't want any nasty surprises, but this is the Southern Caribbean, and they do tend to happen here.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been pretty unusual. You don't typically see this many storms form in the Western Caribbean Sea this late in the year. At this point, you start to see...
but it was coming, wasn't it, though? The Caribbean's been
I mean,
dead
it was,
for so
but
long.
It was, considering that, but at the same time, at this point in the year, you typically see more subtropical activity, further out in the open
you do see
North
Caribbean
Atlantic.
storms. They're usually weaker, but...
Yeah, but also just not at this frequency, too. We're at 4 in the past couple weeks.
Well...
I know, because it was silent beforehand, and all of a sudden, kaboom!
Was it Beta,
But
Delta,
on the
Gamma,
flip
and
side
now
of
Eta?
that, apart from those subtropical things out in the Atlantic that maybe turn tropical later, the Caribbean is the only tropical breeding ground at this time of year now.
That's true as well. I think I saw a question a little bit up in the chat about Atsani as well. I want to see if we can find that too, because that's also towards land. They said, what's the best and worst track for Atsani in regards to the Philippines?
Okay, well, further south track would be the worst because there's higher population centers. But you know, that's sort of saying that it would be better that the storm hits the northern part, but you ask someone who lives there and they'll say no.
Well, I think best case really would be it goes north of the current model guidance or consensus tracks and splits between Taiwan and the Philippines instead, and then dissipates in the South China Sea. But right now, at least, that doesn't look as likely as this morning, though considering the higher than usual uncertainty, that could go back to being the most likely solution by the time the evening ends there.
Yep, so just a reminder that we are covering the main features tonight, double feature, this tropical storm Atsani, which has the Philippine name, I'm getting used to the names again, Siony I believe it is, and in the Atlantic we've got tropical storm Eta, which looks like this, or looked like that earlier today on that floater imagery. I'm just trying to get a better one. Well, there's the infrared that we were just loading. They take ages to load, but there we have a full loop at last, I think. Oh no, it's still not quite finished, but we're nearly there. But still blowing up some good cloud tops, really high cloud tops in those latest frames actually.
I was thinking, are those minus 80s or minus 70s on that particular sandwich imagery?
I think it's more than that.
Actually, yeah, that has to be at least minus 80s, because on the typical infrared they use, that's the pink indicating the minus 80s. So, very cold cloud tops with the Caribbean storm again.
Just fetch that for you.
Because we were covering beta, we were noting specifically in the Caribbean Sea how it had extraordinarily cold cloud tops for a storm. At peak, it had minus 93 degrees Celsius cloud tops. So those are really cold cloud tops on the southern side of the storm.
Yeah, the peak cloud tops in this right now, I'm trying to get a proper number. It's about minus 86, 87.
Yeah, if those start wrapping around, considering the trend we've seen and the potential that Iowa's trying to finish closing off, that's much more of a problem than what we were seeing earlier today.
Yeah, but then there's also the thing that storms at lower latitudes tend to have higher cloud tops, though.
That is also true as well.
Let's see what else we've got in the comments right now. New recon heading for the storm, apparently.
Yep, it is on its way. I just had a look.
It's just taken off, so it'll probably be at least an hour to an hour and a half plus before it gets to the center of the storm.
Oh, sadly we won't have
but it has
that here.
taken off. So would this system be similar to similar to Auto of 2016?
I think it might be a bit worse than that.
Yeah, I mean, Auto is also one of the last storms that also fully crossed over into the Eastern Pacific, still as a tropical system as well. But the difference is that this is going to be further north, so even if their intensity at landfall is somewhat similar, say this goes up a little bit and is a Category 3 operationally. Of course, Auto made landfalls Category 2 operationally, but was revised upward afterwards. This would be heading into an area further north, and unlike Auto, which stalled out while it formed, this would be moving very slowly or stalling as it moves on shore and when it's moving further inland. So you're a bit of a different situation in that regard. The rainfall risk from this system, close to a meter for forecast totals right now, would certainly eclipse Auto in that regard.
Also moved fairly quickly through southern Nicaragua, and even though they weren't, they're not as prepared for tropical cyclones as further north, there's less land to cross over, and it was over water again fairly soon. I can't remember exactly how long it took, but this will be over land dumping rain for 3 days plus.
Yeah, and as a reference to compare, Auto, after making landfall, was back out in the Eastern Pacific in less than 18 hours. So, very different situations in that regard. I think, like you said, Nathan, beta of 2005 would probably be a bit better of a comparison for a rain risk for Central America.
The convective bursts have started to rotate around the centre in the latest frames, says Hurricane Discussion. A little bit.
It's still mostly confined to the southern half almost completely, although there's a bit more cohesion organization of colder cloud tops than, say, 6 hours ago when it was just, a disorganized mess in that regard, at least.
Could this become a Category 2 by tomorrow morning, kind of like what Delta did?
I don't think that's particularly forecast right now,
No.
but things always go over expectations occasionally. Right now, at least, it's forecast to be around 90 miles
by
an
the
hour
way,
at that point.
Before we started the stream, one of our other members, Thomas, was, well, we're keeping count of how many times Strat says particularly during the stream. He just did it once. Anyway, the storm's edging closer to Central America, and rain threat, of course. Question, do we think it will regenerate north? Something will, whether it's under this name or New Storm. We're gonna find out, aren't we?
I mean, right now, at least at day 5, this is forecast to be over the far northwestern Honduras is still a tropical cyclone at tropical depression strength. So it really is, if you go on past that, which, model runs are you saying?
Do you have models
you
there,
wanna use
Strat?
most?
It'd be nice to take a look.
I can screen share a couple up really quick if you want me to.
We'll get, take your time. We'll get those in a little while. So those two areas, and they're all both of them blowing up significant cloud tops. Atsani in the Western Pacific and Eta in the Atlantic. We're taking questions on both. Could Atsani explode like Goni? Is a question that we've just received. Not as much. Less
I think
time,
right now-
less heat content.
Yeah, that, and also shear is going to be more inhibitive than other times, and its organization is way looser than Goni or Raleigh was. Again, for new people that are here, even though this massive blob of convection just offshore of Luzon make you think the center is somewhere embedded within that, the actual center is well to the east of that convective burst just off the coast of Luzon. It's still well offshore, and it's going to have to take substantial time to organize and actually improve its structure before it can really intensify more substantially. But it is still forecast to become a typhoon, and potentially a significant one.
Do we think that Eta will be similar to Mitch?
I'm fairly sure we've covered this.
Well, people come in all the time, and that's often the first question on people's lips. Is I understand why people gravitate to the worst example they can think of a storm in this position, but it's not going to do a Mitch.
No.
It would be I would imagine it would be a catastrophic failing of agencies there if somehow a disaster of that magnitude managed to materialize again. And Mitch was a Category 5 just about, 60 miles off the coast of Honduras, and then it stalled and weakened so much it was Category 1 at landfall. It was still dumping huge amounts of rain for days after that. I think it was 5+ days of rain that was over one part of Honduras, and the damages from that were enormous. I think it was quoted that it set the country back 50 years or something to that effect.
Wow.
Yeah, I got the computer models now. I'm about to pull them up if you want to show those really quickly too.
We don't have it with us right now, Strat. Oh, now we do.
Oh.
That little
Sorry,
magic
my
noise in the
hands.
background means that we
Click the
now
button.
do have it, and I've got to press oh no, it's loaded. There we go.
Yeah, so this is the GFS model, for example. There's a plethora of models, and this is not the only solution by any means for the Western Caribbean. You can see
Get a load
Eta
of
right
this.
there. This model deepens it substantially to 966 millibars before coming on shore.
Now that is very believable.
Yeah. What it does do, though, see, this is 24 hours out, 1 p.m. Tomorrow. So this is, tomorrow afternoon Eastern time. What it does here is it slows it down offshore, unlike a lot of other models, and the consensus was just that on land or moving inland barely at that point. So it doesn't have it actually make landfall until about 1 a.m. on November 4th, in between 7 p.m. and 1 a.m. on November 4th instead. So the difference between that and, say, the National Hurricane Center's track is that on that move where the GFS dives it down to the south just offshore, the consensus is that it'll be making landfall at that point and then drifting very slowly inland.
Slow movement there.
So that's the difference. Regardless, though, it still moves very slow because this is, this is 7 p.m. tomorrow, local time. And by the time you get to Thursday, November 5th at 7 a.m., 3 days later, it's barely moved at all. It's gone from northern Nicaragua to, near the northern coast of Honduras at that point. So regardless of which solution actually occurs, the fact that, as the National Hurricane Center depicts pretty accurately in the track, this is going to be moving near nil from Tuesday afternoon all the way to Friday, just moving very slowly, generally in a westward direction. That's where that major rainfall risk comes in with this system for the potential of up to 3 feet of rain. Pull up the European model as well. It shows a much more disheveled system, but a similar message too. This is Tuesday at 7 a.m. local time. It's just making landfall in the model at this point. And for the next 3 days or so, it just drifts slowly across Nicaragua, across Honduras, into Guatemala on this run at least, and tries to split almost into two different areas. What happens at that point and beyond is less certain. This is 7 days out, though, so this is, not really the realm where it can be used in a reasonable form, but, interesting solutions for the models. Don't look at that. Don't look at that. That's potentially something that could happen with the energy of the storm, but it's too far out past a reasonable window to say.
Well, I wanted you to show it further out because it leads into a question: could Florida get really lucky and not get hit at all?
Well, this model, for example, the European, if you go all the way out to 10 days, has it just off the southern shore of Cuba, and whether or not this is Eta or they decide this is the next storm, which I think would be Theta. I
think it's still Eta there. And GFS is also now on board with it being the same storm. Yeah,
that's, that would be the European. The GFS, for example, if you go that far out...
Here we go.
shows just this blob mess.
Have you seen the GFS?
No, this is my first time seeing it.
Well, keep going.
This is 10 days out. So this isn't, anything that should be taken with too much of an estimate, rather than saying, this is interesting to watch if this keeps up in consistency in the models for another half a week. But GFS takes it also back towards southern Cuba at around the same time as the European.
And further?
And then shelves it out into the Bahamas, and then rapidly intensifies it, and then takes it back into the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos and back into Cuba. What is this?
Back into the Caribbean. That is just crazy.
All right, I just want to clarify very, very, very strongly that is not a reasonable model solution to use with any sort of trust. If something like that occurs, I will eat my own socks.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yes, and I really hope that doesn't come back to bite me. But just keep in mind that anything past, say, this point, which is 120 hours, is where the reasonable forecast period really ends, and especially past, say, 168 hours, which is 7 days, you're just into pure speculation. While the GFS drifts whatever mess this is back towards Cuba and Jamaica at that point, that's not really within too much of a reasonable period, and it's still getting towards the far more speculative end of things.
Okay, do you want to show us the Western Pacific then?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Whilst we wait for that, there's more questions here. When can we see the damage in Catanduanes in the Philippines? Well, I don't have it to hand, images, but I think most people have seen online what it has looked like. Complete devastation in some areas, enormous mudslides, which is blanketing whole areas. Buildings being swept away. And it's kind of the thing you would expect when a Category 5 typhoon makes landfall. And I'm sure that we've still not seen the full picture at this point. Can Atsani become a Category 5? Very
It would really
unlikely.
have to blow past any expectations set. This isn't like Goni or Raleigh, where it beat expectations, but it also had very favorable conditions for the most part. It's still facing some substantial shear right now, although that will decrease in the coming days, but its structure right now and lack of general organization, along with a bit cooler sea surface temperatures and lower ocean heat content, will pose substantial problems for it, especially as it stalls almost for the next 2 days or so.
Do we think that Eta will run out of time to intensify to a major hurricane? It is close to land, but it's intensifying pretty rapidly. Would you be... I'm guessing both of you would be surprised if this recon flight that's coming in failed to find a hurricane by that point.
I would be, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to get there for probably about 2 hours or so, or an hour and a half. That'd be, actually, no, the advisories don't come out at 11 p.m. Eastern anymore. They come out at 10 p.m. So it probably won't be there before the actual update's out.
Oh no. Yeah, it's in just over an hour.
Yeah, that's the daylight savings time for you. But considering
But if you used UTC like we have at the bottom left-hand corner on all of our streams, then there wouldn't be a problem.
Well, maybe we should, but considering the system's improvement in structure since the last recon left, and the fact that
It has.
microwave imagery has showed an eye apparent, whether or not it's fully closed or not isn't really too particular in this regard. It would be more surprising than not, considering the rate of intensification, to not see a hurricane in a couple hours from now. And I also have those models up for the Western Pacific if you want to go over them too.
Yes, let's go on to that. Let's just see if there's one or two questions for people responding to the GFS run that we saw earlier. With this disbelief. Will Goni surpass Haiyan for the costliest Philippines typhoon? No idea at this point.
We don't know.
People want to know if we're going to do a documentary on Goni. Not sure. And just a moment. I was just looking through some more comments there as well. I don't think there's anything else of note just now. So, Strat, over to you.
Yeah, well, here's the GFS again, this time in the Western Pacific. You can see Goni there on the left, Raleigh, entering the South China Sea, as it has been. This doesn't really depict the mess that it's disheveled into, but there it is. And on the right, you can see Atsani, or Siony, which is depicted pretty well in this model, with the convection being displaced west of the actual center, and a lack of general organization with the system. If we play this out and go to 30 hours from the model initialization, so this is in about a day from now, a little less than a day, there you can see Goni better organized, which isn't impossible, but it's hard to kind of see that happening right now unless more substantial changes happen to the structure of the storm. And then to the right of that, you can see Atsani, or Siony, getting much better organized, although not really intensifying much in that time frame. If we go out another day, then you can see Goni's kind of stalled off in intensification, or re-intensification is meandering towards the Vietnam coast as a weak tropical storm. And Siony is much better structurally, although its pressure hasn't dropped much yet in this particular GFS run. And then if we go out again another day, this GFS run takes it just north of Luzon, barely.
Probably
so this spreads the needle.
Batanes Islands there.
Yeah. As a much more organized system, although not particularly intense, it actually intensifies it while crossing the strait between the Philippines and Taiwan.
What pressure was that? Was that
987.
So that's borderline typhoon.
And then it brings it down to 982 here at the next frame. And then in the South China Sea, it begins to weaken and dissipates by the time it reaches Hainan Island.
And then you've got the next storm by that point.
yeah, this would be the next one. This is 156 hours out. I think this is 2 p.m. local time for the Philippines on November the 8th. This would be the potential next system passing near northern Luzon as well, trying to take a somewhat similar path. If we use the European real quick, this is a bit later initialization. I'll actually see if we can get the proper runtime. There we go. This would be a day out from now, or actually less than a day. This would be 8 p.m. local time, so about 12 hours from now. Raleigh, not particularly strong. Siony getting better organized. That's the same story among computer models. As we head towards day 3, which would be about 2.5 days from now, Siony's much better organized. I'm going to pull up the model that shows the millibar so we can get a better handle of the pressure. This one. I just need to make sure I have the right one. Be this one. So that's 995 millibars on this European model in about 2.5 days from now, a little bit less than that. By 3.5 days from now, it's at 987 millibars, barely skirting and making landfall on the northern coast of Luzon. And then in the South China Sea at day 3, weakening. And 994 millibars along southern Hainan Island, and then just moving into Vietnam and getting completely disintegrated.
But what about the model that saw Goni coming more than any of the others, the HWRF?
Oh dear, let's take a look.
I'm seeing it right now, I can tell you, but I'll let you take a look. Here it is on day 5.
Well, I'm not
mature
particularly excited by
Typhoon.
seeing its day 5 point there, so let's go out now. So this is a couple hours from now. This is about 5 hours from now. No, 4 actually. It organizes the system pretty quickly over the next 2 days, around the pace of the other models, but a bit faster. 990 millibars, not a Typhoon yet. That is 56 knot sustained winds, around 100 kilometers per hour. By the time you get towards landfall, or actually doesn't make landfall, it takes it in between the Philippines and Taiwan, fortunately. But it has it way stronger than the other models.
Oh no.
Just south of the Batanas, peaking as a Category 3.
If there's any solace, though, it's small enough in this that there's no gale force wind sustained on northern Luzon, although some of the islands are going to get impacted, and there's barely gale force winds in southern Taiwan in this model run. So there is some solace in that if such a thing were to occur. And then it takes it into the South China Sea and maintains it as a typhoon, potentially towards, I think it's Hong Kong and Macau. So
the storms just don't survive that far as Hong Kong in November, though, do they?
No, I mean, this is showing a marked weakening trend at that point. You're going from 960 millibars to 970 in less than a day. So, it'll continue to weaken if this model run were, to go a bit further out. Regardless, though, still highlights the uncertainty with the storm, both in track, with some of those models further south and the Hwrf being further north, and intensity as well.
So would you say that the HWRF is overdoing Eta back in the Atlantic?
I mean, there's been a feeling that the Hwrf has been just the high-end intensity estimate for almost every storm that we've covered this year. I'm pretty sure it takes it further north, too, and brings it closer to Belize than some Nicaragua or Honduras. So I would
Just
take that part of
the
the
latest
south.
run, I think, actually, the HWRF is a bit more sensible. It's a high-end Category 3 now on the forecast that makes landfall just over the border in Honduras.
I'm looking at it right now. It has it at 935 millibars,
Ooh.
but a pressure of 96 knots. Or actually, it immediately brings it in 6 hours from 95 knots to 110 knots.
Wind of 110 knots.
While the pressure goes up 4 millibars.
Naturally.
So I'm not sure how reasonable this particular model run is just based on that. It's because it takes it from right now at 990 millibars on its initialization down to in 24 hours 946, but having winds of 110 knots with that. So
hold on, 946 in 24 hours.
Yeah, the Hwrf again.
I struggle to believe that one.
This has been the high-end intensity estimate for basically every storm we've covered this year. You can go back to Hannah or Isaias or Douglas, or Laura. Even recent storms like Delta, Beta, Goni, and now this, and Atsani as well. It's been the high end for virtually all of them. So,
All
while
right,
technically
but
possible, it's hard to believe this one too much.
but here's the big test strat to test the HWRF, because if it's much more aggressive than the NAM 32 kilometer, then it's not worth looking at. And the NAM
Does
32
the NAM 32 kilometer
kilometer
cover this region?
Yes, NAM 32 kilometer actually is quite weak on this. It initializes it way too high. Initialized it at 996. It's obviously 989 at the minute. Deepens substantially on the final run up until landfall, believe it or not. But it's still only a borderline category 2 at landfall on the mesoscale.
I think a borderline Cat 2 or 3 is, the much more sensible estimate considering the time this storm has left and the conditions it has.
The NHC forecast is pretty good.
Yeah, it's just hard to see this, say, drop 60 millibars in a day, almost. I think is the point to give out here, more than anything else. The Hwrf has been right on some intensities this year, but that's mostly because it's been the high-end intensity model for basically every storm, and then a couple of those storms have managed to reach that high-end intensity estimate.
And there again is geocolor imagery of Eta, which I must say it's tempting to misname it Zeta, which we've already had.
Yeah, names are so similar, aren't they? It's really confusing.
Well, if we get a next storm, I think the next storm's name is Theta too. So I
And
don't
they're
think
right
we'll be
next to each other on the naming list. Zeta, Eta, Theta.
And at least there's a difference between Epsilon and Delta, or Beta,
Yes.
and the rest of these.
Yeah.
Let's take some more questions. We've got just a few more minutes here, so get them in quickly. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. We'll be able to pick them up for you and have a discussion. Just having a look once more. Any chance to get to 30 plus total storms in the Atlantic? Well, this is number 28. So my answer is yes. I don't know what you guys think.
I really hope not, but there's that doubt in my mind that it will happen. Again, I really hope it doesn't, but this year is just gonna keep on keeping on.
Yeah, well, I mean, it could honestly, if the NHC decides to dissipate this storm, or say it's dissipated, and then some disturbance from it comes out in the Caribbean Sea and tries to be crazy, it could happen, late this week if that scenario actually were to occur. Other than that, I think a couple of the models are trying to say a system near Iberia could attempt to acquire some subtropical characteristics
I have
later this week as
seen
well.
that. Yes, I've seen that.
Is that one particularly valid? I wasn't sure. I didn't see the soundings very well. I wasn't very sure.
It's about
if it was
as
saying it'd
valid
be
as valid as it was for Alpha.
Oh god. So I think we talked about this on air, a few days ago, when it's really much further out, and just hinting at something that could potentially try to happen, is that a cutoff from a trough that was carrying the remnants of Delta, or Beta, I'm sorry, dropped
It's
down.
just getting confusing, isn't it?
A cutoff from that drops off a cutoff low in the Mediterranean Sea, which is going to drift westward into the far eastern Atlantic Basin, north of the Canary Islands. And I think the GFS at least gives it subtropical characteristics at day 4.5 to day 5. So, I mean, whether or not that actually unfolds, I haven't been looking at all the other computer models.
Let's do some rapid fire question and answers. Does Eta have an eye?
As far as in my video, I pointed out that it didn't quite have one, but there is one being made.
How similar will Eta be to Beta of 2005? I'm thinking it could be quite similar.
Beta of 2005 is definitely a better comparison than Auto of 2016 or Hurricane Mitch, I would say.
How many
Yes,
possible typhoons is the Philippines expecting within a typhoon season period? There could be another 3 or 4 yet in a worst case scenario.
I mean, long range models alone right now, and this is of course taken with more grains of salt than normal. Say if you include Siony and the Invest, and then one more that the GFS tries to develop, you'd have 3 in the next 2 weeks of storms. Not necessarily the intensity. That's if all of those actually occur. So, the season's not over yet there, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's it. Can Eta rapidly intensify if it heads north near Florida? I think when you're getting up there, we're beyond rapid intensification now this time of year. The only place I can see rapid intensification is in the Caribbean Sea.
Yeah.
Someone's mentioning the issue of Hwrf model for Eta that we just went over. It really isn't the most reasonable outcome at all. Just to answer that, it's much more likely to see, borderline Cat 2 or Cat 3 or low-end Cat 3 landfall than something obscene like that.
Yes, I'm just trying to catch up here. How many inches of rain could Jamaica pick up? I think National Hurricane Center were talking about, was it 10 to 15 that they were saying?
For Jamaica, is that what the question said?
Yeah, unless I read it wrong. 5 to 10, I'm sorry. Isolated amounts to 15 over southern areas is what they're saying. So, up to 380 millimeters, isolated amounts. 125 is probably your minimum.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things of this hurricane season has been Jamaica getting very substantial rainfall from at least 4 separate tropical cyclones. Eta would be at least the 5th now. But having them track in such a way where there hasn't ever been a tropical storm warning even issued for the island this entire season. So, I mean, it really goes to show even outside warning areas, rainfall and other conditions with tropical cyclones can be very substantial threats.
His question's very unrelated, but will Strat the movie become real? Well, if there's any picture houses watching us right now, Strat's probably available for you. How many... Oh, we've had that question already. What's the best case scenario for Florida? The best case scenario for Florida is that Eta misses, which is still much more likely than not.
Yeah. I was going to say as well, Florida's not, as of now, is not in the projected path. So, is Strat okay? Yeah, so again, Florida's not in the projected path, but some models do think that the storm is going to curve upwards after landfall in Nicaragua. It's going to curve northeastward, or back up towards Cuba.
And the best case scenario in Central America, well, I don't think there'll be that good a scenario. It's going to be a idealistic scenario that would miss Central America. It could still theoretically do that, a recurve towards the north. It would mean danger for someone else, but for Central America, yeah, I mean, the people asking about best case scenarios, it's a difficult question to answer, really.
Yeah, it's one of those difficult questions.
And one more question there. We're just about to end here. Could the storm rapidly intensify at the rate of Delta?
What was Delta's rate like?
Pretty quick.
Miles an hour in 18 hours or something like that, or in a day?
Yeah, I just remember it went for, I think it was Category 1, straight all the way up to Category 4.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta keep in mind, this is gonna have land interaction beginning before that, so that will probably begin to slow down the rate of intensification a bit. And also, I don't think Delta's a really good comparison because that literally was the fastest ever storm in the Atlantic go from tropical depression to Category 4 strength.
That was what we thought was going to be the Wilma storm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately it capitulated, but, I don't think that's the best comparison per se, if that makes sense.
This won't do a Wilma, and it shouldn't do a Delta, but it could be a Category 3 landfall in just less than a day and a half. So to summarise, and thanks to Christian and Strat for taking part tonight, it's been nice to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, thank you.
To summarise, Tropical Storm Eta is probably about to become a hurricane as it approaches the coast of Central America. We've also got in the Western Pacific Atsani, which is on its way, blowing up convection now in the Philippine Sea, although it's going to do a loop before it arrives in the Philippines. What's left of Goni on the left-hand side of your screen is how we started tonight's broadcast after its trail of devastation across parts of the Philippines. It has weakened so substantially in 36 hours, down from a 195 mile per hour historic typhoon landfall to barely a tropical storm, but it could still deliver impacts to Vietnam, which is already had difficulties from all of the previous issues from typhoons that have caused serious flooding issues. But there we have it. That's it for tonight. We'll have more coverage at some point in the future, along with video updates on our Force 13 page. You can find us on all of our social outlets, Facebook and Twitter, and you can join our Discord discussion live, discord.gg/Force13. Good night.